a podcast about product management, user experience design, technology, and more. This is Product by Design. All right, welcome to another episode of Product by Design. I am Kyle, and this week we are happy to welcome another guest to the show, Fredrik Von Schreeb. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Yeah, you did. It sounded good. It's better than most people do it. So yeah.
Welcome to the show, Fredrik.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here, Kyle.
Awesome. Let me do a brief intro for you, Fredrik, and then we'll have you tell us a little bit more about yourself. But Fredrik is a passionate and innovative copywriter with a wealth of experience across a number of different industries, originally from Sweden and now in San Francisco. So a lot to unpack there, but why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, I'm 32 years old. I live in San Francisco, been here for approximately 6 years. Moved over here for school and just decided to stay in sunny California because it's a lot warmer and not as dark as in Sweden.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to talk a little bit more about your background, about copywriting and advertising, because I think it has so many things relevant to a lot of the things that all of us do on a day-to-day basis. But before we dive into that and into your experience, why don't you tell us about some of the things that you do outside of the office?
Outside of work, I'm a huge sucker for storytelling. I go to the movies probably like 2 or 3 times a week. They have this A-list on AMC that lets you watch like 3 movies a week. I think it's $20 a month. So take highly advantage of that and go to the movies a lot. More recently, I've started climbing a lot. I find it like a very fun way to exercise. Usually exercising can be a heavy lift and not as fun, but with climbing, it's something really childish and fun about it that I love. So I'm doing that and some surfing, and we got a dog too, me and my girlfriend. So that takes a lot of time too.
Awesome. Well, I'll be excited to hear about some of your either favorite movies or things that you've watched recently. We usually ask towards the end for some of the things that you might recommend. So that'll be an exciting one to get some of your take on. But the dog that you have, what kind of dog do you have?
I have a little Australian Shepherd miniature. His name is Blue. Yeah, we got him from Montana, and he's 2 years now, and he's crazy, but he's very fun too and very lovable.
Very nice, very nice. Yeah, we have a young golden. We have 2 dogs actually, so a golden retriever and a golden doodle, and our golden doodle is 8 or 9 months old now, so he's still a puppy, and
it's that wild age.
He's a riot. So it's a lot of fun having dogs around. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'm excited again, like I said, to jump into your journey, some of the things that you've been working on. So why don't you tell us more about that? Tell us about your journey. What brought you to what you're working on now, and what led you into advertising and copywriting and the space that you're in?
I've always been fascinated about storytelling. I think it started back when I was a kid in Sweden. I remember we had a VHS tape. Do you remember those like old VHS tapes? And I think we had like a recording of Braveheart on one of those tapes. And I think I must have watched it like 200 times or something. I won't say like Braveheart is the best movie of all time, but it definitely has made a big impact on me. And there's just something about the storytelling and a journey unfolding that's always fascinated me, and it's carried me through my whole life. I love telling stories. I love exploring new things, and I think movies really lit that adventure inside of me that's taken me here. So coming and studying abroad and working in another country in a language that's not my first language has been like a very big challenge, but also a big adventure for me to do. So that's what took me here, basically. And advertising and copywriting it's storytelling. It's really connecting to emotions and feelings and creating a journey and a story about a brand. And I just love getting to do what I really love and what I'm passionate about too. So
that's awesome. So I want to talk a little bit more about a couple of those things. But first off, tell us a little bit about I'm interested in the experience about coming from Sweden to the United States, and specifically San Francisco. What were some of the things that were maybe different than your expectations? What was that experience like? Both that either were in line with your expectations or maybe different than some of your expectations.
Yeah, definitely. It's a huge cultural difference, Sweden from America. America, people are more outgoing. They say what they think, whilst in Sweden, people are a little bit more careful. They're trying to be a little bit pleasing everyone, which can be, for me, I've always thought that being a little bit annoying. I want to hear the truth. I want people to speak directly to me. And I feel like in America, people are better at doing that, especially around here in Silicon Valley where I work, where you need the fast results. You can't linger on and talk around stuff. You need to get the results fast. So visiting America and experiencing that excited me. And that's also why I wanted to move here, because I wanted to work in an environment where I get to really put myself out there and show good work and do good work. And if I don't do good work, people are going to tell me that directly, and I'll know how to evolve and become better with it. So definitely that's the cultural difference that I feel is the difference between here. And also people here are very helpful and people want to see you succeed. So I feel like when you're doing something, when you're doing a good job, people are very vocal about it and really pats you on your back, and it motivates you to continue striving towards greatness.
Oh, absolutely. So I'm interested in your we've kind of talked about it a little bit, copywriting and the advertising aspect. For those who may be listening and maybe new to it, what exactly is copywriting in the way that we're talking about it and in what you're working on?
I think it's telling the story. When you visit a website, a landing page, it's obviously the first thing you're going to notice is this sign, and that tells a story by itself. I think copywriting goes into the depth of it, and it really gets into the details and explains what the brand and the value is about. So it gives the broader story of what a brand is. And it's not only the words you use and such. It's also about like how much text you use. Like if there's a lot of text, that tells a story. Whilst if you don't use a lot of text, that's another story. So it's the power of words and filling the gaps and the white space. Yeah, and you need to be strategic with the words you choose and how the nuances of language to effectively communicate what you want to say. But it gives like the broad picture and the storytelling of a brand.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that is a really, really great way to look at it, is that, when we think about the whole experience of a product, you're really looking at, when you go to a website, for example, like you said, there's the design that is there. Yeah. There's some of the experience that in the interaction. And then a really important part is the words and the story. And like you said, the copywriting or the copy of what is there, the storytelling of everything that is on that site or on, whatever it is that you're looking at, telling the story of the brand or the product or whatever it is, which is such an important part. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that, because, I don't think we don't talk enough about that, but why is that such an important part of a company or a brand or a product?
I think it goes down to people want to be part of a community, and whenever they visit or see something that they resonate with, that's gonna build a bridge. And I think that's what's copywriting is so important too, because we're not just selling services or products. We're trying to connect with people. And the best way to do that is with words, because we talk to each other, and we can't do that online. Like we can't always get one-to-one contact. So when people visit our website or interact with a brand, we need to resonate with them and make them feel that connection with us. And that's where good copywriting does a really good job of connecting with people. And some brands do it really great, and some brands do not. And it's so much more also about like keeping a consistent voice throughout too. And if people connect with it, they're going to love it. And if they don't, they're not going to buy your service or product too. So I feel like it's a very important thing. And a lot of brands that I see are not keeping a consistent voice throughout. And that hurts them.
Absolutely. I'm interested. Do you have any examples that come to mind as far as brands who are really good at the copy or copywriting or storytelling of their products or brand or services, and maybe some that we won't call them bad, but aren't as good or could use some work in their copy or their storytelling that come to mind?
Yeah, I think definitely like probably the most two famous are Apple, who does great copywriting and great writing throughout. And they've always been very focused on keeping a good design and also good copy. And they don't overuse their copy either. Like you don't see a lot of copy on Apple sites. And I think that works in their favor too. Not being too much out there and keeping some kind of mystery around them. Even though like they're the biggest brand in the world, they still have a mystery feeling to Apple. And what does that? And that's the copywriting that they have. It really feels like an exclusive club that you want to be a member of. I'd say that one opposite is probably Facebook. That's a little bit too much everywhere, and you kind of get annoyed by it, and it doesn't come off right, and it's hard to pinpoint what exactly it is. It's just like a feeling that you get, and I'm sure you can you can agree on that with some brands that you just feel like, I don't really like this brand, but I don't know why, or I really like this brand, but I don't know why either. And I think that comes down to how you're messaging.
That's such a good point when you bring that up. So, I mean, obviously when we talk about Apple design and copy, like it feels so effortless and so good that I think most of us will think Apple when we think of just really, really good overall design and storytelling. And that comes down to, the UX of it, the UI and the copy. But when you mentioned Facebook, like immediately popped into my head so much of the experience and the copy. Like I hadn't really thought of that initially, but when you said it, I was like, a couple examples came to mind and I was like, oh yeah, that is absolutely true. And you're right. I hadn't put my finger on it before, but there's so much going on, and it feels disconnected in a lot of ways that in a lot of times and this probably goes to your point, that a poor copy and poor copywriting and poor storytelling kind of disconnects all of the different areas of a product or a brand or a service in ways that we may not be able to feel, or we may not be able to see exactly, but we can feel it. And it really has a disjointed experience. And when you start to put a finger on it, you're like, oh yeah, there's either too much going on or the story differs too much from one point to another. And it just leaves, I guess, a bad feeling or a bad taste in your mouth.
Exactly. Yeah. And I feel like also to that, great storytelling and great copywriting leaves you with a feeling that you want more. You just want more. I want to learn more about this, even though I know everything about it. There still must be somewhere I can explore something more. Whilst on the other way, I had enough. Leave me alone. Get away from me. Cancel stop sending me spams, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm interested because you've mentioned before about working at a startup now, and previously working at an agency and now working in-house. Tell us a little bit about the difference between working at an agency, doing copy and copywriting versus working in-house. What have been some of your experiences and some of the things that you've seen, both the benefits and maybe drawbacks, and what that experience is like, both as a copywriter and maybe as a brand?
It depends on, a lot of agencies work differently. On some agency, you'll be working with just one brand. On another agency, you'll be working on several. From my experience, I've been on agencies where I've been working with several brands all at the same time. And you kind of become like a pod of that brand while you're just working with making an advertising campaign. And that can be a good thing in a way, because you don't have a fully understanding of the company and what their story is. So you can really become creative and create really fun stuff with it. And I think there's some agencies that do that really well. The problem is also that you don't know everything about the brand and the values. So you might miscommunicate what they're trying to say. You might have troubles really understanding what the brand is about. Whilst if you're in an in-house, you have the full scope. You have the full picture of what the value, what they're trying to say, where are we heading to? And I think that makes such a big difference when you're writing too. And I prefer being an in-house from working in both, because I really want to have that full understanding of what the company is. And writing flows so much easier with it too. And you can, and it's just really fun to get to know someone it becomes like a really good friend that you get to know, and you get to talk about that friend and how much you love them.
No, I can definitely understand that, in really being able to, obviously the benefit of being able to bring kind of an outside perspective from an agency and being able to add, some of that either experience from other places, but then also really in-house being able to dive deep and have that really deep understanding and knowledge and bring a lot of that out in the copy and the storytelling for a product and a brand and an experience. Now, you mentioned you're working at a startup. I'm interested in some of the benefits and challenges of, creating that story and the copy at a startup. What has been some of your experience in doing that, in the storytelling, in the startup stage?
Startups were fun because it's really fast paced. Like, everything needs to happen fast, and it's moving quickly, and there's not enough personnel to go around. So, but you also get to really explore and push the boundaries of what you're trying to say with this brand, because it's constantly evolving, and especially in a startup, everything's not figured out, and you're basically A/B testing everything to see where you're going and trying to figure out. And it allows for a lot of experimental text, experimental copy to try and see what we can be. It's a really fun journey to be on. And in a startup, everyone's working towards the same goal. Everyone feels a community feeling of trying to make the best possible brand there is. It's a lot of fun. I'd say that's the benefit. And you get to work with a lot of people who feel the same, who are excited about what you're doing. Challenges is, you're going to work hard. You're going to work a lot. There's going to be points where you're missing the goal, and you'll learn from that. But I think it's a really good place to be, especially for young people in the industry, to learn how to make mistakes and learn from them. I think a startup is a really great place of doing that.
Kind of the ability to wear many different hats and have your hands in a whole bunch of different areas. You don't necessarily always get that at larger established places, but at a startup, it's almost by default, where you have to be involved in a whole bunch of different things, and you have to be working across multiple teams in a whole bunch of different areas in different ways. So totally agree with that, and that's definitely been my experience as well. What if I told you that a year from now you could finally get that Chief Creative Officer promotion, lead a larger team, and have your CFO finally understand the value of design? It all starts with Future London Academy's MBA for Design Leaders. During our 5 2-week modules in London and California, you'll be in the same room with creative leaders from around the world, learning, collaborating, and sharing laughter and tears. You'll go behind the scenes of the top design agencies and most inspiring companies while receiving bespoke mentorship from CEOs, CFOs, and design leaders from Dropbox, Pentagram, Wolf Olins, Zaha Hadid Architects, and many others. With Future London Academy, you're here to erase borders, question everything, inspire others, ignite ideas, make friends, challenge the impossible, start a movement, invent solutions, think differently, change the world, and never stop learning. Become one of the 30 changemakers today. Apply now at bit.ly/chief designer. That is bit.ly/chief designer, or check out the show notes for the link. You mentioned when we were talking before that you're working on a rebrand, and I think rebrands are fascinating. I was part of an internal rebrand early in my career, and then was part of a rebrand more on the periphery as I was working with a product team, and we were part of a group that was helping another company do a rebrand. And these could be like really, really massive things in order to do something like that. Why is a rebrand such a big deal? And what has been your experience with that? Going through the process of rebranding, and basically, I think it's kind of there's rebranding can be as simple as changing some of the logo, but I think it goes deeper than that in really taking a lot of the things and changing almost the perception and some of the story behind it. So I'm interested in your take on working through a rebrand, working through all of the things that go with it. What has that been like, and what does that really entail?
Yeah, no, rebranding is it's something really fun and interesting to do. And our CMO talked about it earlier a few weeks back, how like a rebranding, if you're lucky, you get to do one or two during your career. But most people don't get to ever work on one. So it's a really good opportunity. And I think the great part about it is when you start a rebrand, you have to take a step back and look at what you've been working on for the past years and see like, is this where we want to go? Like, where's this leading us? If we're going to do a rebranding now, we have to pivot away and have a good cause of doing that. So it's really like an internal, you go internally and look through everything, what your core values are, what you're trying to say. And you can really, really experiment a lot with the rebranding. And it's really fun to experiment around and see where we go. And you can plan like, where we want to be 10 years from now. And I think that rebranding is a really refreshing start. It feels like, you remember like the last scene of The Lion King when everything's on fire and then the rain starts and everything turns green again. It's kind of like that. It's a new start. It's a new beginning. And I feel like it's a revamp and it's an injection of energy into a company. Sometimes it's very much needed for a company to really start a new chapter and get going forward.
I definitely agree. So I'm interested in working with all of the different teams across an organization. So obviously that's an important part, especially in a smaller organization, as you're working on the products and the marketing and the copy that will go and kind of tell the story of all of the things that you're showing to users and customers. How do you work with, all of the different teams, from the product team to the UX team to the marketing team to the sales team? How does that all come together in this story that you're telling, in the copy that you're writing for the different products and the brand?
Yeah, as the marketing copywriter, I'm going to be responsible for external copy and our advertising campaigns. And it's really vital for me to understand all the different teams and how they're working and how they write. What you don't want is every team to become a little hub where they're doing their own thing and writing in their own way, and the voice is going to be all over the place. So you really want to keep that consistency throughout a company. Then, I mean, it's you want to keep a consistency and a voice throughout, but still working on product, you want to be very informative, whilst working on social, you want to be fun and inviting, and it's nuances to how to shape a voice. And that's the real challenge of working as a copywriter on a company is keeping that through line, that red line throughout the company, but with the little nuances on every team that impacts and make it specific for them. And yeah, it's a challenge, and it never gets perfect. You're always working on it. It's a working process throughout, and it's not supposed to be perfect either. Because if it's perfect, you're not gonna. If you want it perfect, you shouldn't have any copy at all. But then you're gonna lose. Then people's not gonna be interested in your company. So it's a challenge, and it's always evolving process of finding new nuances and shaping the voices.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And how do you go through that process of finding the right voice for some of those different areas, whether it's on social media, whether it's in more technical documentation? how do you find the right balance, and then how do you find kind of that consistency for, either to begin, and then how do you go back and, continually work to revise some of that? Because like you said, it's an ongoing process. Walk us through, I guess, some of that balancing act.
Well, I think what we start with is we really trying to create a Bible, a style guide or a brand guideline, say, and we work from there. And you have to create sort of a map of where the different teams are at. Like if it's an X, you make an X and Y axle, and if it's going to be fun, it's going to be a little bit more over here. If it's going to be educational, it should be on the other side of the map. But it still has to keep that, like I said, through line throughout. And it could be with wording, it could be different words that you use throughout all the different categories. But yeah, I think like working with a map and creating a style guiding guidelines is really important to do that throughout.
I think that's a great place to be. Now, I'm interested because there's kind of a spectrum, at least in my experience, of companies where I've worked in companies where we've had writers and writing teams, and as a product person, I'm able to put together copy, for example, for product specific things, and have the writing team either take that and adjust it, and then either put it out there or let me put it, post it to product specific areas. All the way on the other spectrum where we don't have necessarily a robust enough writing team or copywriters or marketing to be able to do something like that. And it's left to a lot of individuals to create some of the copy for whether it's the product specific areas or some other places. Have you seen that? And what would be the best way to deal with something like that, especially when you definitely want to have a consistent voice and you want to be able to tie all of these things together, but especially in some smaller companies, it's not necessarily given the foremost thought for to have this consistent story and this consistent voice throughout.
I think some company you cannot expect the copywriter to be everywhere and tweak everything to make it perfect. And I don't think it's good for a company either. I think you really need to trust your employees also. And just because you're working on product, just because you're working with design doesn't make you a bad writer, say. You still understand the company. You still understand what you're trying to do. And you have the most knowledge about what you're working on. So you're going to have an understanding of what you're trying to say. Then a copywriter can come with an external view on things and say, hey, I don't really understand this. We need probably for our clients, for our customers to understand this, we need to say it in this way. But I think everyone on a company should really try to write as much as possible if they have time for it, because it's really good for yourself to understand what you're trying to say if you write it out. Instead of just leaving it over to a copywriter. If you can explain what you're trying to do, you're gonna become better at working with it too. So I think everyone should try to write as much as possible, and a copywriter can be there to help you, to guide you, to tweak things. But like I said, the product team is gonna have the most knowledge about the product, so let them write first, and then have a copywriter come in and tweak things.
I absolutely love that. I totally agree that I think everybody should write and should write more, because I think that that's a critical part of any business and really any understanding of a product, of a user experience, of a brand in general.
Yeah.
And then, depending on where you're at, like you said, being able to have a dedicated copywriter or somebody being able to add the unified voice or the additional context to some of that, especially early on, when you're trying to keep all of that unified and really put together a cohesive narrative and story, and, have that really be a team effort of everybody contributing and then trying to tie that all together in a really good way. And then as you scale up, obviously, you have a lot more options to be able to have more people involved in that, and have maybe more dedicated people doing the writing, but never really giving it up entirely, especially for people who are closest to it. It shouldn't be something kind of like you said that goes away. If I'm the person who's closest to it, I should still be very much involved if it's my product, in helping craft some of that narrative and story, but also working very closely with somebody who can help tell that story in a way that also ties together with the rest of the story that we're telling across the brand. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, exactly. It needs to be collaborative, because sometimes there's situations where I get handed a brief. Oh, can you explain this product or this thing? And I know about the product. I know how to explain it, but I don't know the nuances of it. So if a product person writes out it first, or we can have a conversation about it, we can together craft what's the best, like what's the best, so a customer can easily understand the metrics of it.
I think that's great. Now, what about when our copy or language or story starts to get a little bit old or outdated? This was something that I know we were dealing with in one of my roles previously, that we had a lot of just older copy and older language and things on there that was really starting to get outdated. And we needed to go through and just really start to revise and update a lot of the story that we were telling and the things that we were talking about. What's been your experience in that? Obviously, that may not be the case necessarily in a really new company, but as we start to grow and things change, how can we, I guess, do better about staying on top of our story and staying on top of the voice and the way that we're telling our story?
Yeah, language evolves all the time, and copy does too. And how we're speaking about products, how we're speaking about a company, is probably going to be changing the next 5 years, and we're gonna need to update the things we're writing today. So I think it's really important, and that's a big part of my job is going around and seeing how we're talking about our product and how we're explaining. And is it do people understand this? Is this updated? Is this easy to understand? And I think that's a big part of my job, is really to find those things that is not working anymore and updating it. And it's always evolving. It's always evolving. Sometimes what we wrote last week doesn't work because something happened culturally in the world and we need to change it. It's always evolving, and you really need to stay on top of things. And so I think being really updated what's going around in the world and how other companies are communicating is really important to do that, and seeing what other people do, what's working for them, and being flexible with how you're speaking, and be flexible with the voice too. Still have that core of it, but be ready to update and evolve around how we speak and how we understand things today.
You bring up such a good point, because language is always evolving, and our culture is continually moving and adjusting. And, the market that we're in or that our products are in can be shifting and adjusting as well. And so being able to adjust to that and tell the story in an appropriate way is really important, because, the way that we're telling it 5 years ago may be the absolute wrong way to tell it now. And especially as we see the way that people are thinking about storytelling and thinking about culture and all of these different things, something that may have been benign, and this is what came to my mind as you were kind of going through that, may have seemed benign a few years ago, may actually be something that is no longer benign and no longer the way that we want to portray the product or portray the story. And so constantly staying up to date with those types of things. How do you go about that? How are you kind of keeping up to date with, a lot of that thinking and a lot of the the language and the storytelling? And then how are you helping other people understand that, hey, we need to maybe adjust the way that we're talking about our products or our brand or our story, because there's these things happening, and we may need to be thinking about that in a new way.
Yeah, I try to really stay updated on what's happening around in the world. Watching a lot of news. I watch a lot of YouTube too. I think like there's really good things to find in popular culture. What's happening on YouTube? What's happening around? What are people reading? What are people interested in? And really draw inspiration from there. And then also looking at obviously other companies, how they're doing. Like who's doing the best? Who's doing the best job at it right now? Who's leading this? Who's leading the language forward right now, and looking at that and looking at trends, what people are interested in, and then really going back and sharing that within the company. Hey, this company is doing this. This is really interesting. People are reacting. And today there's so much data to find around this. And we can really be, if we really take the time and look into data and looking into trends, you can really stay on top of it and be one of the companies that drive it forward. And just have that conversation. And not being afraid of changing and evolving and trying out new stuff. I think sometimes companies can be scared of trying new stuff because they set a voice. It's taking time to figure that out, and doing changes to it can be scary. But I think we always need to be experimenting with different things. And there's always really interesting and fun outlets to experiment on. Right now, we're doing some interesting stuff with SEO writing. It's boring writing, people say, but you can do really fun stuff with SEO writing. You can really get a joke in there and make people laugh, and make something fun of something that otherwise is not as interesting as
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's great. No, for somebody who wants to maybe get into copywriting or advertising or just general storytelling, what advice would you have for them in order to get into this?
If you're really interested about it, I'd say, find things that really inspire you. For me, it's always been movies, and great writing in movies have always inspired me to become a writer. And that's what really brought me here. It's that storytelling and the being able to pinpoint a feeling, be able to pinpoint an emotion. That's what inspired me a lot, watching movies, that I can really be drawn into it. And that's what I always wanted to be good at. I wanted to write stuff that people get drawn into, that people find interesting, that they want to read, and that makes people feel things. So I'd say if you're passionate about making an impact and really doing something fun and creative, I think writing is a really good outlet for that.
I think that's awesome, and a great way to kind of get into it, and probably a great way to explore a number of different opportunities or other things like that. So I think that's awesome. Now, is there anything that you wish you would have known before you had started or earlier in your career?
That I wish I knew? That's a good question. No, that it takes time. It takes time to write something simple. It takes time. Whenever you see something and you think, oh, that's a very simple way of saying it, there's been so much written before that's taken them to that place, because the simplest stuff are usually the most well thought out stuff. The more words you're trying to explain a thing, the less thinking there is behind it. So it's all about writing out everything as big as possible, and then just revising and shortening everything until you have that one sentence that explains something. And I think earlier in my career, I've been anxious to just get it done, and not taking the time into refining and making it perfect. But it's a process, and you have to understand that the process is going to take time, and it's going to be frustrating sometimes. But once you get to that point when you have something really, really complicated explained in a sentence or two, it's a good feeling to feel.
Yeah, I highly, highly endorse that. It definitely takes time, both in your career in order to do the things that you want to be able to do, and then to create the really good work like you're talking about. Like, it is to do something that looks effortless. It really does take a lot of time. And I've found that absolutely to be true, going into just a number of different things that, you think that, I'm going to be able to do this and I just want to get it done, but to do it well and to come out with that really nice finished product, it always takes more time than you think it's going to. And just having the patience in order to say, this is going to take some time in order to get it, but ultimately it's going to be worth it. But it just, like you said, it just takes time.
Yeah. And you have to just allow yourself to accept that it's going to take time. Yep. And also eventually you're going to be able to love that fact too. You're going to be able to love the fact that it's going to take time, and I'm going to treasure every single moment of it because I get to do something that I really love. And you must really understand that too with the woodworking, I guess. That's
that was the exact example that came to mind when you said that. Because when I first got into woodworking, it was one of those things that I thought would be a lot faster than it actually was. And then to get in and just spend hours and hours doing what seemingly were very, very simple things, I was just like, am I doing this wrong? And how is this taking so much time? And then you realize that that's part of the process. It's, part of the joy of it is that it takes time. And it's not, it's not a shortcut thing where you make a couple cuts or do a couple things. That's part of the joy of it is the process and the time that you take doing it and not rushing it and not, taking a whole bunch of shortcuts in order to get to the end. But the joy of the finished product is a lot of times the time that it takes to get there.
Yeah, you look at it and you're really proud of yourself that you allowed yourself to take the time and allowed yourself to let it become something really great. Because I sometimes feel early in my career when I did things, I was never happy with the end result because I always thought, oh, this is not good. I could do it better. But when you really sit down and you really take the time and you're going to end up much more happier with the end result. And you're going to feel a lot more prouder and a lot more confident in your work too.
Exactly. Yeah, totally agree. I absolutely love that. Well, Frederick, this has been a really, really great conversation. I have two wrap up questions, but before we get to that, where can people find out more about you, about the things that you're working on, and anything else?
Well, my Instagram is not very up to date or active, but you can find me on LinkedIn. Feel free to add me, and I'll happy to talk anything copy, anything movie. Just hit me up there. I'm always happy to have conversation with new people and getting to learn new ways of writing and new ways to express yourself.
Okay, awesome. Well, we'll put that link in the show notes as well.
Awesome.
Okay, well, we usually end with just a couple questions around any shout outs or recommendations that you might have. And I'm interested in this one because you mentioned movies. So anything that you've read or watched in particular that you have enjoyed or want to recommend?
Movie Oscars is coming up soon. So if you haven't watched all the best film nominees, and if you should watch one, I would definitely recommend Everything Everywhere All at Once. It's a magnificent way of storytelling, and it touched me on so many points that I had to go see it 3 times in cinema. I actually might be going again this weekend, but it's just amazing in how the Daniels wrote a movie that it has so many genres in it, and it's really exciting. It's fun, and you'll laugh and you'll cry throughout the whole movie. So, big recommendation if you haven't seen it yet.
Absolutely agree. Really, really good movie. It had been talked about before I had seen it. It had been talked about a lot and did not disappoint, which I always worry about when movies have been talked about frequently before I see them. Definitely worth seeing. It was really good. Okay. And then finally, any products that you have been using and enjoying or not enjoying, could be, a digital product or physical product that you've used recently or use frequently that you want to give a shout out to or an anti shout out to.
I mean, it would be weird if I didn't mention ChatGPT, right? Yeah. I've used ChatGPT a bit, and I think it's a great way to get you started. I don't think it's a great thing to use for a final product, but I use it sometimes in a way to get a thought starter, and it's a really way to start your wheels turning in your head and start thinking about things. So I think it's a great tool. It's a really interesting and fascinating tool, and I'm ready to see, because it's at its worst right now. It's just going to become better and better. And I'm interested to see where it goes and if I'll lose my job for it.
Yeah, hopefully. I'm super interested. Yeah, super interested in seeing where it goes as well. And I've been using it a lot in a very similar way to either kick off writing or to take ideas and reframe them. And then I don't feel like I'm ever satisfied with what comes out of it. But it always gives me like another place where I can take it and then either, take some of the ideas and then rewrite them or reframe them in a different way. But I think it's great from, like you said, a starting off point to say, give me some information or take all of this and, condense it down in some way. And then I can take that and reframe it or take it as like a starting point and reuse it in some way. So I enjoyed that for a lot of different purposes. And so, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It'll be interesting to see, like, as it continues to get better and better, like what are going to be more and more applications of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree with you.
Awesome. Well, Frederick, this has been a great conversation again. Love the insights, especially around a topic that I don't think we talk about enough, which is the copywriting and storytelling. So this has been really, really great, and really appreciate the time and insight that you've shared.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kyle, for having me. It was really fun, exciting conversations, and thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you everybody for listening. We will talk again next time. Thanks again for listening. If you like the show, be sure to follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. You can follow the show on Twitter at prod_by_design. That's prod_by_design. You can follow me at Kyle Larry Evans on Twitter as well. If you want more product conversation, check out my newsletter, Product Thinking, at productthinking.cc. You can follow me on Medium at Kyle Larry Evans as well, or check out my Medium publication, Product by Design. Thanks again.